Good evening, and thank you for coming. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here as we, actually, I don't know why I put the title that I did in the bulletin and stuff like that for this talk. A more accurate title for this talk is Contemplative Activism, the Power to Change the World. Okay? So that's more to the point of what we're going to be talking about. So raise your hand. How many of you get frustrated when you watch the news? How many? Two hands. How many get frustrated when you go down your Facebook feed in the morning and see all these little things that come up? How many of us get frustrated with people? Some people? How many of us get frustrated or angry about like social issues that we feel that we can do nothing about? Good. And how many feel sometimes powerless to change anything? The big things in society. Okay. We're in a good, can you take a paper and a pen and a rosary back there? Thank you. You're in the right spot. If you're, because hopefully when we leave today, we're going to feel a little more lighthearted, we're going to feel a little more enriched, and we're going to feel a little more powerful. That we can indeed do something to change some of that stuff that we see on the news and that we just want to put our fist through the TV. I feel like that sometimes. I mean, sometimes literally I just have to turn it off. I can't stand it anymore. And I think people experience this who are on either side of the spectrum. I think people experience that. So, the good news is, in this talk, I can show you how you can concretely change the world, how you can be an agent of positive social change. And I hope that after this talk, you will feel empowered and go out and empower others. Tell them about it. I base some of this talk on a book called Subtle Activism, The Inner Dimension of Social and Planetary Transformation by David Nicole. It's a really dense book. I kind of think it was his doctoral dissertation. But so a lot of this talk is based on this book. As well, some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, I've learned from Harry Pickens, who has kind of become a mentor of mine over the past 2 or 3 years. As well as some personal thoughts that I've been grappling with for a long time now. How can I make a difference? How can I change? Am I powerless? Or can I do something? If you look at our society today, especially our public rhetoric, the injustice, the climate, poverty, abuse, crime, the sacredness of life, the shootings, etc., and feel absolutely powerless to do anything to change any of it, I hope you and I will leave this evening feeling empowered that we can change things. And I'm going to be talking about just one way that we can do this. And it may seem weird. It may seem a little unbelievable, but I invite you to be open. First, we said all of us get frustrated and angry and kind of carry this angst around in us, and it's like, what do we do with that energy? What do we do? And how can we dissipate some of that energy? So I would like to first lead us through an exercise that Harry took me through, and it really, really helped shift that frustrating, angry energy to a more positive thing. So, the exercise. I handed out papers. The first 3 pages are blank. And hopefully you got a pen as well. So on the first page, what I'd like you to do, and if you can see this, there's a circle and then like spokes coming out of the circle. I would like you to draw a little circle in the middle of the page. And in that circle, write these words: worries, burdens, concerns. Okay, everybody got the circle with the words: worries, burdens, concerns. Now, what I'd like you to do is take a minute or two right now and just draw lines and write on them every worry you have, burden you carry, concern that you have, things that make you angry, or whatever. Just keep brainstorming and keep those lines going, and just write down just in a couple words or a word what they are. So when you're finished, take about 30 more seconds. And the good news is, if you leave something out, you can continue to do this exercise by yourself at home if another thing comes up. Okay, we'll wrap that up. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I wrote down when I did this with Harry. Politicians, the challenge of the gospel and how to speak the truth of the gospel. Rabuni's financial future. Harry's mom. White nationalism, the divisive rhetoric on the left and the right, the lack of unity and compassion in society, the separation of kids from their parents, groups being demonized, feeling a lack of power, climate, the future of democracy, fear of civil war. Those were some of mine. Now what I'd like you to do is just look at yours Look at the things that you wrote down, and on a scale from 1 to 10, rate each of them. 1 being, this isn't bothering me much at all. 10 being, oh my God, this is bothering the heck out of me. So rate each one. Just put that number by each spoke of that wheel. And really take a little time to get into the feeling, what you are feeling, get out of your head, and rate those things 1 to 10. 1 being barely bothering me at all, 10 being, oh my God, it's off the charts. And try to feel some of that worry, that concern, that anger, that frustration. We'll take about 30 more seconds to rate. Okay? On the next page, flip it over, and on the next blank page, again, draw a small circle, just like the front. And in that circle, write the word gratitudes. And then take a minute or two to put those spokes out there and just brainstorm everything that comes to your mind that you are grateful for. Everything. Just let her rip, you know. Take about 30 more seconds. And again, when you're looking at these gratitudes, really try to feel the gratitude. Thank you, God, for these wonderful things in my life. Thank you, God, for these wonderful things in our world. It could be as simple as the sheets on your bed, or running water. Lawman talks about that a lot, having lived in Zambia, being able to turn on a faucet. So they could be big things or little things. I'll just share some of those things that I wrote. Rabuni, very grateful for that. I'm grateful for freedom, for the freedom to speak, for the freedom that we have here. But grateful for air conditioning. Must have been a hot day. I'm grateful for my bed and my CPAP machine from sleep apnea. I just love that CPAP machine. And I'm so glad, it's like whoever invented that, thank you. I'm grateful for whoever invented stents. I've had 2 of them at 2 different occasions. Before stents, I would have had to have 2 open heart surgeries. As it is, I was in and out in a matter of hours. What a great thing. Contemplative resources and prayer, books, reading, havening, which I've talked about. I'm a certified havening practitioner, psychosensory thing that helps remove the emotional content of pent-up stress and trauma. I am grateful for sunshine and home and friends, romantic possibilities, and health. Those are some of my gratitudes. Okay, turn the page. And draw a little circle again. And in that circle, write the word choices. Choices. And then on the spokes, just draw a line and think of any action step that you can take, any choice that you can make that will help you move beyond some of the anger or the frustration or whatever. What are some things that can help you move beyond? You know, I'll just read some examples as you're writing yours. Contemplative prayer. Incense rite. I almost every morning do an incense rite in my house. I bless the house because I see a lot of you there. I see other clients there, so I want to bless that space. Reading empowering books. Getting more rest. I can't read some of these. Designing talks. So I guess that's where these 2 talks were born. Listening to the news less. Cleaning a little. Or organizing. Going on retreat. Getting a massage. Self-havening. Staying connected with friends where I feel a sense of uplifting and nourishment and friends that I can talk to. So those are just some of mine. So basically, in the third, what we've done is we've reminded ourselves in the midst of all the crap, there's still a lot that we have to be grateful for, right? We have a lot to be grateful for. And in the third, the choices, we are not powerless. I have choices. I have exercises. I have things that I can do. You have things that you can do to help lift you. Does that make sense? Are you feeling that at all? What I'd like you to do very briefly is go back to that first page, and I asked you to write from 1 to 10 how much these things were bothering you. Go around again and just see if the level of anxiety or powerlessness or anger or frustration has gone down at all on any of those areas. Again, rate it from 1 to 10. 1 being not bothering me at all, 10 being off the charts. Yeah. Yeah, if you're feeling a new number. If you're feeling, not as bothered as when we did that at first. So did anyone's numbers go down at all after doing this exercise, or did they pretty much stay the same? A couple of them changed. Anybody else change? A number go down? Not as bothered? Or pretty much there? 1? Okay, that's good. That's progress. Yeah, it doesn't need to shift a lot. But what I would encourage you to do, and what I do every once in a while when I start feeling that angst or whatever, I can just take 1 issue instead of 20 issues. And then do the gratitude list again, and then the choice list again around that issue. And gradually what I find is that I'm beginning to feel more free. I'm beginning to feel more happy. I don't feel like putting my fist through the TV when I watch the news as much. So I encourage you to do this. It's a very simple exercise to do. Do it at home, especially, again, we have a choice. We can do something about the frustration or the anger or the whatever. We are not powerless. This is one small exercise that we can do that will begin to lift us from that. Does it make us deny that? No, not at all. The concerns are still there, but I think once we remind ourselves that there's much to be grateful for despite that, and that I have choices, I can do things to help that situation or to help myself deal with that situation. The other person or that issue in society may not change at all, but the way I feel or how it bothers me can change. And I find this exercise very powerful over time. It begins to shift some of these concerns, okay? So hopefully as you do this, you can slowly realize, and I think if we do this exercise over and over, I think we will slowly over time begin to feel, all of a sudden we're going to wake up and go, gosh, it doesn't bother me as much, or gosh, I feel more empowered, because I can do this, I have this choice, or gosh, because I'm doing this exercise and some of the other exercises that I'm going to be talking about, I don't have to put my fist through the TV. I can look at social choices or social action not from a place of anger, but from a place of peace and empowerment. Did you ever notice how some activists, both on the left and the right, are really angry people? Really angry people. I think that just exacerbates problems instead of making wise choices, doing things that can concretely change things. To stand in front of a politician and say, he should be killed. and to lead a protest in that way, violence begets violence. And so if we come at social change or changing a family member or a friend from that place of anger and frustration, etc., it's not going to work. This exercise is going to help us get beyond the frustration and the anger so that we can more gently and more clearly see. We move from reacting to responding. And there is a huge difference between reacting and responding. I think we know that, right? When I react, God help what comes out of my mouth, or whatever. But if I respond, and this exercise is one that helps me respond. It helps me, when I call some politician's office not to scream at the person taking the message for whatever senator or representative or president. So, okay. So hopefully that will work. Second, what would you say if I told you that you can make a concrete, measurable, positive difference in society just by praying and meditating? You believe it? Maybe, maybe not. That just by praying and meditating, we can make concrete, positive, social change without lifting a finger. Does it take the place of social action? No. But we can make a concrete, positive, social change without lifting a finger. Too good to be true. Sounds too good to be true, right? Monks in monasteries generally don't go out and get involved in concrete social change, but I believe that they are affecting society in a positive way. Do you? Or do you think their life is a waste? I just use that as an example. If you don't think so, go to a monastery and stay there, or just stay for a couple hours. Go to Gethsemane or whatever. Stay for an hour or two, and you will literally feel the energy in that place because people are praying and meditating every day, constantly. Has anybody ever had that experience in a monastery or a religious women's community or at Nazareth or whatever? Has anybody ever had that? Or out in the woods, some place in nature, whatever, where I get in touch. At your cabin might be a place where that's experienced. There's an energy there. Harry Pickens once told me, I was telling him about my friend Daniel, my best friend, who is a monk in a monastery that I've mentioned a million times. He said to me, I believe monasteries, be they Christian, Catholic, Buddhist, Hindu, etc., are the glue that's holding this world together. Thomas Merton said that when he arrived for the first time at Gethsemane, he wrote in his journal, I feel that places like this are what is holding society together, and from us just annihilating ourselves. Just praying and meditating can make a positive, concrete, measurable social difference. Jesus said it this way, believe. Love that Christmas movie, what's it called? Express, the train. Polar Express. And the song, Believe. If you just believe. We did that in the choir at St. Edward's. Jesus said it that way. Believe. Your faith has healed you. Your faith has been your salvation. In our scientific society today, that basically changed in the Renaissance, really. We began to shift from believing in these energies, these spiritual energies, as real things that do real change. Once the Renaissance came, we got into scientific thinking, and all of a sudden today, I don't think a lot of us believe. I think a lot of us believe that stuff is hocus pocus. Hocus pocus. A bunch of hooey. Your faith has been your salvation. Your faith has healed you, Jesus said time and again. I used to think, when I read the stories of the miracles in the gospel, I confess to you and to Almighty God, I didn't believe. I did not believe those stories were true. I thought that they were embellishments. But I wonder, did he walk on water? There are some Buddhist monks in our own day that walk on water. Look it up. Look it up. Remember, for those of you who were raised Catholic and have some age on you, like me, do you remember praying the rosary for the conversion of Russia? I don't know how many rosaries I prayed as a kid. I would pace that backyard and pray that rosary for the conversion of Russia, and you know what? Not a thing happened. Not a thing happened. You know, I would pray the rosary. A lot of you know that I grew up in an alcoholic home. My dad was a very abusive, angry alcoholic. I prayed rosary after rosary after rosary. God, take my dad. Take my dad. You know what? Nothing happened. It only got worse. But when I look back on those days, I think that prayer, those rosaries, gave that little boy something concrete to hold on to. It gave that little boy hope in the midst of a hopeless situation. It gave that little boy hope in the midst of a powerless situation, in which that boy felt extremely lacking in power to do anything to change his dad and to change that situation. All I wanted is for my dad to die. I did. That's what I would pray for. And it only got worse. But eventually, in the slow work of God, things changed. Frankly, in my family, my mom finally divorced my dad and got him out of the house, so he was gone. And then unfortunately, 6 months later, he was dead. Years later, after praying all those rosaries for the conversion of Russia, my God, we never thought the Berlin Wall. Who would have thought the Berlin Wall would come down? Who would have thought that the Soviet Union would have fallen apart? Years later, things changed. I can't help but believe that all of those millions of people praying all over the world, holding a concrete intention for the conversion of Russia, didn't make a difference in that actually coming about. I can't help but believe that. It may seem like like voodoo or whatever, but again, I call our attention to the Gospels. Do we believe? Do we really believe in those energies, those powers? As a matter of fact, in our own day and age, there are perhaps our Eastern brothers and sisters probably believe more in those energies and those powers than we do. Native American shamans probably believe in those energies of healing much more so than we Westerner, than we scientifically trained people. Scientists are even believing in the reality of those powers more than Christians, more than people of faith. Now, the Kabbah. We must, as Greg Boyle says, he says, I must believe in the slow work of God. Again, I preached one Sunday and I talked about Greg Boyle. He is I believe he's a Jesuit priest in Los Angeles. He works with the hardest hardened gang members in one of the poorest and most violent areas of Los Angeles. And some of them, he said, just don't seem to get it. No matter what he does, no matter what his organization does to try to help these gang members, some just don't get it. Some get killed, some stay in the gangs, but some do change. And he says this: no matter how many times he gets disappointed by a gang member going back out to the streets again to do drugs or killing or being killed, he says, I must still believe in the slow work of God to convert some of these gang members. And part of his ministry is not only direct work with the gang members in going to their homes and getting to know them, and he's well respected in those very poor, violent neighborhoods. Well respected. But part of it is he gets together with his Jesuit brothers every day, and they take time together to pray with the intention that these gang members might convert, might get out of that cycle, and might be able to turn their lives around. And he says, I must believe in the slow work of God. So sometimes we're not going to see results right away in that family member that drives us crazy, or that societal issue, or that politician where we just want to, go through the TV and wring his or her neck. But we have to believe in the slow work of God. Sometimes we won't see the fruit of our prayer or meditation, but that does not mean that it's not making a concrete, measurable, positive social difference. In this book, Subtle Activism, and it is dense, but I encourage you to get it because most of this is about science and about scientific studies. In this book, Subtle Activism, he talks about concrete scientific studies that have been done and continue to be done on the efficacy of prayer and meditation. Not only the efficacy for the individual praying and meditating, but on society. The most famous of these studies is called the Maharishi effect. Maharishi was the one who popularized transcendental meditation. Remember that, like in the 60s and 70s? He popularized that. If you would indulge me, I just want to read a little bit of what David says about what's come to be known as the Maharishi effect. In the early 1960s, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, founder of the Transcendental Meditation movement, predicted that if as little as 1% of the population practiced transcendental meditation, they would create an influence of harmony throughout an entire society. In the mid-1970s, with the introduction of the more advanced TM-CD meditation technique and the discovery of the greater potency of group meditations, the prediction was amended. If just the square root of 1% of a population practiced the transcendental meditation in a group setting, they would have a measurable positive effect on the whole society. This formula came to be known as the Maharishi effect. It has been extensively tested, researched, spanning 30 years. As 28 studies on the Maharishi effect have been published in academic journals, another 18 in research anthologies. The results have consistently shown highly significant correlations between the practice of transcendental meditation in large group settings and improvements in a broad range of social indicators, including crime rates, auto accidents, fires, war deaths. It's hard to believe, isn't it? It's very hard to believe. Our ancestors didn't have such a big problem believing this stuff, but we do, because we're so scientifically trained. Again, I want to impress on you. I'm just talking about contemplative activism tonight. It is one tool of social change. It does not take the place of making concrete actions. But what it will do is help us make those concrete actions from a place of peace and compassion instead of anger and frustration. And I think we'll get more done. He says here in 1973, the crime rate increased in the controlled cities by an average of 8.3%, whereas in the 1% cities where people were meditating, crime rates were found to decrease on average by 8.2%. The likelihood that this result occurred by chance was calculated at less than 1 in 1,000. These are scientific studies being done on the concrete effect of prayer and meditation. I don't know about you, that blows my mind, and I find it extremely hopeful. Extremely hopeful. And maybe we need to take up again that belief as one tool in making social change or changing that person that drives us nuts or whatever. This seems weird. It seems amazing. It seems too good to be true. That just by sitting on my meditation cushion at home or with a group of people, holding a specific intention, for example, for more peaceful political rhetoric or dialogue. It seems unbelievable that just by sitting on my meditation cushion, holding that intention, along with other people who are doing the same thing, that eventually some concrete social change will happen. But Jesus and the saints have been saying this for centuries, right? Centuries. But do we believe it? And again, I say in our scientific society, we don't believe it. We've thrown that baby out with the bathwater. We have thrown those beliefs out. If anything, again, I find that it's the Eastern religions who are influencing us into believing that again, into believing that power again. You know, when the Dalai Lama comes to town, it's no accident that he fills the Yum Center. Why? Because people are attracted to that sense of belief and social change. And you know what? He prays for that. He meditates for that. He's not seeing the fruit of it at all in Tibet. He's not. He's still in exile. But he still holds that intention. Did anybody go to see him when he was here at the Yum Center? He gave a day-long retreat. It was packed. I went. Yeah. And the sense of peace that you experience, that I experienced, around him, and he was like a little dot on the stage, where I was sitting in the Yum Center. But there was an energy there. Concrete energy. Did you ever notice when he's interviewed how funny he is? He could be the most bitter person in the world for what he has seen the Chinese do to the Tibetan people, to their culture, to their religion, to him being thrown out of the country. He could be the most bitter person and unhappy person in the world, but he's not. He's one of the happiest persons. He's one of the most peaceful persons. That's what I'm talking about. That's the magic, if you will, of this stuff. That we can, all this crap going on in society, and we're seeing it increase more and more than ever. Last week in my talk, I talked about, some of that is because of the screaming heads in radio and television and stuff like that. We are just being barraged. Now, there is scientific, measurable evidence that it is true that prayer and meditation alone make a concrete, measurable, positive difference in society. In this book, he cites many, many scientific studies that have been done, proving that. Some come from discoveries in physics, quarks, and stuff like that. Anybody familiar with some of that? It's wild. It's wild. But I love physics. I read this book by a priest who's also a physicist. He's from Ireland. His name is Jarmud O'Murchu, and he wrote a book called, what was it called? Physics and Theology. And in the book he was saying it's physicists who are believing in this stuff more than theologians, more than people of faith. It's physicists who are discovering that everything is connected. We are all connected. It's physicists that discovered that we're all made of stardust. You know, when a star exploded billions of years ago and sent all of these elements out, and then our sun formed, and our planets formed, and our home, Earth, formed, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of stardust. We're all made of the same stuff. And physicists even say that some even say that there is no such thing as solid matter. To now talk about really, there's no such thing as solid matter. Well, I'm holding this pew. Sure seems solid to me. Well, some physicists are saying this is an illusion, because everything that we see is simply waves of energy at its smallest form, waves of energy moving at incredibly high speeds. If the waves of energy stopped, it would just fall apart. We would too. You know, so I find that fascinating. So physicists are saying, okay, if at the smallest level, subatomic levels, we're talking smaller than atoms, if at subatomic levels everything is just waves of energy, and there's not even any solid matter in the wave of energy, we're all connected. We're all connected. And because we're all connected, my thoughts, my intentions can make a difference in somebody's life. Now, physicists are believing this. Read his book. But people of faith are not believing it. Kind of interesting how science is coming around to this and teaching us so-called people of faith. Other studies talk about the unity of consciousness. We think we're separate beings, but we're not. Some physicists even say that everything, living, inanimate, the whole universe is simply consciousness appearing in form. We would call that God. So if we look at the universe, it's God's consciousness appearing in form. We are a spark of God, appearing in form. We woke up for some mysterious reason in the 20th century. Why? Did you ever wonder about that? Why did I wake up now? And not when St. Francis of Assisi lived, or when Jesus lived, or when Buddha lived, you know. Why did I wake up now? In this particular place? There's a specific reason for that. Personal consciousness is probably the most mysterious scientific thing to be studied. So the whole universe, physicists are saying, is simply consciousness appearing in form, waves of energy moving at different speeds, that nothing is really separate, but all is connected, all the same energy moving at different speeds. And that because we're all connected in what's called, how many have had that experience? Raise your hand. Almost all of us in this room have had that experience. We're connected. We're connected in this collective way, in this mysterious connected way that we don't even realize it. I find that fascinating. Some people call it coincidence. Is it? I find it fascinating. I believe that we are connected, and the more that we believe this, the greater the positive impact is. It's like waves in the ocean. Each wave in the ocean is distinct, right? But it's still part of the ocean. A wave can't exist except for being part of the ocean. But we can say the wave is there, and it's distinct from the ocean. We can call it a wave. We don't call it the ocean. But it's part of the ocean. So each of us is like a wave. But we're part of the collective consciousness. Part of that. I hope you're finding this fascinating. I just find it fascinating. We're all connected in this ocean of consciousness. And just as individual waves affect other waves in the whole ocean, so each of us, as individual waves, can and do affect others just by our thoughts. Okay? I want us to watch a little video, a short video. I just wanted to show that much. Fascinating? I think it's fascinating. We're uploading and downloading from this collective consciousness. The good news is that I find is that we can change it. Does it seem unbelievable that monks fly? Sure as heck does to me. But in our Christian tradition, we have various stories of saints levitating, Padre Pio levitating, getting the stigmata, St. Joseph of Cupertino levitating while he was saying that. Is it true? Is it not? I find it fascinating that some people can change the collective consciousness by believing so much that, oh, I can run that 4-minute mile, or that I can levitate in meditation, or, whatever. And then it breaks into that collective consciousness, and more people begin to believe it. I believe that in our scientific shift in the Renaissance, prior to that, we had a strong belief system in believing that miracles are possible, that people can be healed, all this other stuff. The Native Americans, again, they still have that in their culture. They still have that belief in their culture. But we don't. But what if we begin to believe it and see it by believing it? The placebo effect that he mentioned, that's the most convincing to me. Scientific study, drug study after drug study after drug study after drug study has been done, and people are given a placebo. And in many instances, the people given the sugar pill are cured just as much as the people who are given the real medication. Not only that, I saw a study done by a surgeon who experimented with his patients. He's a knee surgeon. And he had two different groups. And in one group, he actually would perform the knee operation. And in another, he would put them to sleep and go through and talk through as if he was doing the operation. And in almost every instance, the people who actually didn't have the operation were just as healed as the ones who did have the operation. We have power to change. I find this fascinating. And maybe it's time for us to believe again. Lawman and Rabuni is a case in point. Everything and everyone said, no, you can't do that. You can't do Catholic Church like that. It can't happen like that. But because one person, Lawman Shabundi, went against the collective consciousness that said, oh no, Catholic Church is done only this way, because Lawman Shabundi, against all odds and with much opposition and hatred, believed in his heart that Catholic Church could be done in a different, new, and a fresh way. 10 years later, here we are. Only because our pastor didn't listen to the collective consciousness. And you know what? Because he did it, more and more people are coming. And various people through the country. Julie Byrne just wrote a book, an academic study called The Other Catholics, Remaking America's Largest Religion. More and more people are doing what we're doing all across the country. All of a sudden, because some people like Lawman Shabundi woke up and said, wait a minute, we can do it differently. That's a case in point, changing collective consciousness. If enough of us begin to hold an intention in prayer and meditation for positive social change and justice, it will change the collective consciousness and change things. I find that incredibly good news. I find that incredibly empowering news. Do I find it a little yeah, but can we believe again? But how connected are we in our energy? Harry Pickens says we all have an electromagnetic field around us that extends out a certain amount of feet all the way around us. That's why when somebody is really hacked off and they walk into a room before they even say a word, you can feel it, right? We're connected. Did you ever have your back to someone, or maybe headphones on or something, and someone walked into the room and you felt their presence? Did you ever feel the presence of a loved one who has gone on to the next life? Something happened, a sound or whatever. In the church, we've called that the communion of the living and the dead. Do we believe it? The church has been teaching that for centuries. I find this very interesting. I find it very interesting. In my havening practice, and havening is, again, a psychosensory technique that was invented by a medical doctor who also has a doctorate in neuroscience from Harvard. And he discovered that just with facilitating simple touch and distractions, people can be freed up from the emotional response of pent-up stress and trauma in minutes. I went through the training. I became certified in that. I am telling you, just by the touch, I have seen person after person after person after person freed from their emotional reaction to a previous trauma. Now, the science has also been done that by this touch and by the distractions, it actually activates chemicals, delta waves in the brain, which, when we have a traumatic experience or pent-up stress, there's a thing called an AMPA receptor in our neurons, in our amygdala, which is our fight-flight place in the brain. These delta waves create chemicals which actually dissolve the proteins that are keeping that AMPA receptor in place, and it recedes back into the neuron. That's why we still have the memory, but we don't have the emotional reaction. Take it or leave it, but I find it astounding, and I find it very helpful. Whether you believe it or not, the science is increasingly there, proving that we can make a difference. So the good news is, and I hope you are realizing, we are not powerless to effect real concrete change, measurable social change, just by our thoughts. You know, next time you're thinking, think of that collective consciousness and uploading a new thing. When you think of a new society, when you think of a gentler America or whatever, upload it. Think of yourself uploading it into that collective consciousness cloud, and maybe it'll happen.